så ska ni få möta en kapten, en svensk sjökapten som heter Peter Hammarstedt. Och han jobbar för en ideell organisation, internationell miljöorganisation som heter Sea Shepherd. Och den jagar maffia som tjuvfiskar. Det står miljardbelopp på spel och det är mycket, mycket farliga uppdrag som de är ute på. Här ska ni få lyssna. Välkommen hit, Peter Hammarstedt, svensk-amerikan som pratar bra svenska, tycker jag i alla fall när jag har lyssnat på dig. Men du jagar sjöpirater, du jagar fartyg som fiskar olovligt. Och du tillhör en organisation, Sea Shepherd, som vill skydda både utrotningshotade fiskar och känsliga vatten som Antarktis till exempel.
Tack för att jag får vara med på showen här, Malou. What Sea Shepherd does is we work to uphold international conservation law. Where there's a law enforcement vacuum, then we exist to fill that law enforcement void. And we feel there are a lot of laws out there to protect fish, to protect our oceans, but what is missing is for somebody to really enforce those laws. That's where we come in.
Jag fortsätter att prata lite svenska ett litet tag till. Men vi ska titta på bilder, för det här är förenat med livsfara, det här jobbet. Så här kan det gå till. Titta här. Sen tar vi extra.
Mission Maru, this is Bob Barker. I will not move. I will not move. You will have to sink me right here next to the Sun Laurel. I am not going to move for you.
Peter, I'm not going to move for you. It's you that are speaking with the captain on the other boat. Is that so?
That's right. This is a Japanese whaling vessel killing endangered and protected whales in a designated whale sanctuary. And I was on a campaign to defend those whales. We were put in a position where this big factory whaling ship, this floating slaughterhouse, was trying to refuel. And so I was deliberately maneuvering my vessel in such a way to prevent this floating slaughterhouse from refueling.
So did it succeed? What happened?
We battled over this refueling tanker for a period of 5 days. And because my crew and we stood our ground against this massive vessel in this David and Goliath struggle, the Japanese whaling fleet decided to quit that season. They only took less than 10% of their bogus self-allocated quota, and we were able to save 932 whales.
Why did they quit? Because you has a quite small boat, this Bob Barker, and they are huge, as you say. What did you do more than being interfering like this, as we saw?
Well, we put the captain of this Japanese whaling vessel in a position where he would either have to sink us or he would have to back down.
And create a lot of attention, of course.
A lot of attention on their illegal whaling activities, certainly endangering our lives as well. And when he realized that we weren't going to move, when he realized that we weren't going to back down, that gave the captain of this Japanese whaling ship no other option but to quit and to head back home to Japan.
You've been on these boats for most of the year, and there are people they're working with you, both women and men. How many people are you on the boat?
We have about 30 crew on board my vessel. About 50% of our crew are women, 50% are men, and they come from all walks of life. They come from all countries of the world. On this particular mission, I think we had about 22 different countries represented, from the United States to the United Kingdom to France, Spain, Ghana, India, all over the world.
And they are volunteers?
Most of them are volunteers. About 80% of them are volunteers. They make tremendous sacrifices to be on the front lines with us. They leave their families for a long period of time. They remortgage their homes. Last Christmas was the first Christmas I spent with my family in something like 12, 13 years here in Sweden.
What is your driving force in this?
I think my driving force is knowing that these animals are completely defenseless without some kind of intervening force to protect them. every day we shut down this Japanese whaling fleet, we're saving 20 whales every single day. And that's what allows me to go to sleep at night, that knowledge that because we intervened, because we were able to make a difference, these whales are swimming free right now.
Are you afraid?
Sometimes I can be afraid. I think I'm more afraid of not doing enough. That's always been my particular qualm.
Because it looks very dangerous when you see the pictures, the film.
Our motto is that we sail into harm's way, but I try to put it into perspective. I remember a few years ago, we documented a whale being harpooned, and this whale was harpooned twice. She was shot another 7 times by rifle shot, and it took about 22 minutes and 40 seconds for her to die. She slowly drowned. And that type of imagery stays with me. It's that realization that anything that could happen to me doesn't compare to the suffering that these animals go through if I don't intervene.
We should look at another clip, which is about how you found these nets. Can you explain what we are going to see now?
Well, a couple of years ago, we were on campaign to stop the most notorious fishing vessel in the world, the Thunder, a vessel wanted by Interpol. And when I found the Thunder, they abandoned their gill net, this long curtain of death that is designed in such a way that it will catch anything that swims into its way. This net was prohibited, it was completely banned under the law. And the crew on our sister ship, the Sam Simon, spent 3.5 weeks pulling this net out of the water, taking it out of action.
So how long was it, the net?
It was a 72-kilometer long net.
And this fish, what kind of fish is this?
The fish was Patagonian and Antarctic toothfish, which has been referred to as white gold because of its value. They're fish that live in some of the deepest waters in the world, down to 2,000 meters depth. They're a very unique fish in that they actually have antifreeze in their blood to prevent their blood from freezing because they are in the deepest, coldest waters in the world.
Are they endangered?
They were endangered because of illegal fishing. And because about 15 years ago, there were 70 of these illegal fishing boats operating in Antarctica.
Which are these boats? Which are these captains, these people
They come from
operating in this way?
Most of these illegal fishing operations in the Antarctic could be traced back to Spain. And in particular, they could be traced back to Galicia, the northern province of Spain, and to mafia syndicates that operate there. It's one of the challenges of addressing illegal fishing is that we have to see it within a broader organized crime context. The people doing these illegal fishing activities are also the same people involved in narcotics trafficking, human trafficking. And it's no small surprise that Galicia, which is really the hotbed of illegal fishing in Europe, is also where a lot of narcotics come through.
How much money is it about?
It's a lot of money. When we found the Thunder, we knew that it had been wanted by Interpol for 2 years. Interpol estimated that they had made a profit of about $60 million in their 10-year poaching career. So by us shutting them down or us interrupting them, we were potentially costing them $6 million a year.
Let's talk a little bit about Thunder, because you are chasing this Thunder for 110 days, is it so?
It was the longest maritime pursuit in history. We didn't think it would last that long, but my crew and I were prepared to chase this vessel for 2 years if we had to. We had enough fuel, we had enough food to stay with this vessel for over 2 years.
Could you explain Thunder? How big is it?
Thunder's about 60 meters long. This is a vessel that would sail in and out of ports completely unannounced. It would operate under 2 or 3 different names and 2 or 3 different registries at a time, which made it very difficult for the police to track them. It was a ship that the world's governments knew was fishing illegally in Antarctica, and yet still it could do it uninterrupted for a decade. And that's why I took it upon myself, and Sea Shepherd took it upon themselves to actually track down this ship and bring it to justice for the first time.
You tracked it in a very dangerous part of the sea. Could you explain, and also explain how small your boat is compared to this Thunder?
The Bob Barker, which is the vessel that I'm in command of, is about 50 meters long. So it's a bit smaller than what the Thunder is.
60 compared to 15.
Yes, 50, 60 compared to 50. So
Okay, you said 50.
50. So
Because it looked very small compared to the other vessels.
yeah, those big Japanese whaling ships are considerably larger. Then we're talking 8,000 tons compared to 500 tons. And it's really a David and Goliath kind of situation. But the Thunder, of course, was an operation that was a very shadowy criminal operation. Nobody really knew who the owners were.
Where are we now, if you look at it?
We're in the most distant, remote waters in the world. We are down in what we call the shadowlands of the Southern Ocean. This is down by the Antarctic continent. We are 2 weeks sailing from the nearest port. There's no search and rescue here. If you end up in distress, nobody's going to come to save you. This is 2 weeks sailing from Australia and 2 weeks sailing from South Africa.
So explain now what happened, because you tracked them for a long time and then finally you found them.
So found them quite early. They appeared through the fog. I was looking at my radar screen and there were icebergs scattered all around. And because there was a heavy fog set in, I was looking at the radar to see if any of these potential icebergs started moving. If an iceberg moved, it was obviously going to be a ship. And out of the fog, this profile of this vessel appeared, this ship that
So what was that feeling?
Well, this was a ship that had haunted my dreams leading up to this campaign.
It's like a ghost ship.
It was a ghost ship. This was the Flying Dutchman. This was the boat that had been spoken about in countless conferences, spoken about by the Ministry of Fisheries in Norway and all kinds of governments chasing and trying to track this boat down. A vessel that had not been seen for half a year anywhere, and now it was right there in front of me.
So what did you feel?
I felt a great sense of relief.
Yeah?
And then I got ready for battle.
And we should look what happened. We have something that you could see when you have... Maybe you should explain, because this is in the end of what happened. What did you do when you first attacked them?
Well, the first thing I told the Thunder to do was I said that they were under a citizen's arrest. I told them that their position and their location was going to be reported to Interpol and to the Australian police and the Norwegian police. And then I said that I would follow them until they go into port. And that was the strategy. Did
they respond to that?
They didn't so much. We had a bit of radio conversation. They said that they asked who we were, and I explained that we're Sea Shepherd and that we do international conservation enforcement. And I said that if they tried to fish illegally, then I would physically interfere and stop them. The first thing they tried to do was lose us through the ice. They immediately went for the heavy pack ice that surrounds the continent. But I followed them through the ice. They then went for the heavy seas that the Southern Oceans are known for. So 8, 9, 10-meter seas were beating the ship as we chased them north. And finally, they decided to try to wait us out. We had a long period of about a month where they simply drifted, trying to test our patience and see whether we had the tolerance to stay with them.
Was that difficult?
That was the most difficult time. Speculation for my crew was our favorite and most hated pastime. We would speculate endlessly as to what this vessel was doing. Any tiny movement, what could it possibly mean? And I remember at one point, my chief engineer came up to the bridge of my ship. He had the fuel figures for the day, and we were burning about 500 liters a day, just what our generator was consuming because our engine was shut down. I had about 400,000 liters of fuel left on board.
How cold was it?
It was quite cold. In the Antarctic, it all depends on the wind chill. So it can get down to minus 20, minus 30. It can get very, very freezing. And when there's rough weather, that's particularly dangerous. That means that the sea spray that blows up onto the ship can freeze, and that creates a big stability issue. So you've got crew out on deck with hammers chipping the ice off the vessel.
But they didn't succeed. You kept on waiting.
They didn't succeed. They couldn't lose us. One of our goals early on was we wanted to break the record for the longest maritime pursuit in history. It had happened 10 years earlier when an Australian customs ship chased a toothfish poaching vessel as well for 21 days before it was arrested. And I remember the elation and joy and celebration we had when we beat that record to 22 days. And then we celebrated doubling the record and then tripling the record. By the time we had beat the record by 4 or 5 times, our morale was really being tested.
They finally give up.
They finally give up. We chased them for 10,000 miles. We chased them across 3 oceans, through ice, through heavy weather, through all kinds of different types of conflicts. Their crew attacks my crew. They try to ram my ship. But finally, we chased them all the way into the Gulf of Guinea, right close to the small island state of Sao Tome and Principe.
Let's have a look.
Said yes, it's a maiden situation. They're gonna launch now the message, but we are the ones that are closer to them.
Yeah, say we received their mayday. We're standing by to assist in any way. Yes, the distress is sinking. They're abandoning ship right now. We're putting a boat in the water to recover them.
So what we see now is that they are, surprisingly to me, abandoning the ship.
It was certainly something that surprised me. I was brought up to the bridge of my ship at 6 o'clock in the morning. The crew were all out on deck wearing their life jackets. They were throwing their life rafts into the water, and yet they hadn't put out a distress call. They hadn't put out a mayday saying that they were sinking.
And this is what we see now is
Took about 6 hours for them to finally sink.
sink the ship.
The
To sink all, what, evidence?
The evidence. The ship is what was wanted by Interpol. On board the ship was 35 ton of toothfish, which was caught illegally. There were computers and mobile phones and other types of electronic equipment that would be useful for policing authorities. And so the captain wanted to send that evidence down to the
But
bottom.
your crew is on that boat before it sinks, so during this sinking period.
Well, so before the ship sank, once it had been abandoned and all 40 of the Thunder crew were in their life rafts, 3 of my crew actually went on board that sinking ship. They took computer hard drives, they took nautical charts, they took evidence that we needed to present to Interpol for their eventual prosecution, which ended up being successful. But it was, of course, a very terrifying thing to put 3 people whose lives you're responsible for onto this vessel. But they volunteered. It was their suggestion to do it. And I'm incredibly proud of the risks they took, because the evidence they gathered is what really ended up sentencing them to prison.
So what happened with the captain? Did you meet him?
I did meet the captain. The first time I actually met him was in a courtroom in Sao Tome and Principe, the small island state in West Africa. It's interesting because in all my other interactions with him, we always had our ships, and I was always
Shields.
our shields. Sure, I was protected by 500 tons of steel in my interactions with this man. He was an unpredictable person, and when he came into the courtroom and he saw me sitting in the witness stand, he immediately rushed at me as if to hit me, and it was the court officials who had to kind of hold him down and hold him back and force him into his seat.
So what happened in the trial?
We had a 3-4 day trial, which I had to testify in against him. And it was fascinating because the judge couldn't wrap his head around why this captain had stayed out for as long as he did. He was almost always within 2 days sailing from the nearest port. And so he stood there in court and said that never before had he been in such fear of his life because we were chasing him. And so the judge says, well, why, if you feared for your life, why didn't you just go back into port? You had 2 days away, you could talk to the police, you could get these people to stop following you. And he said, oh, well, I had my orders. And that was his answer through everything. He wouldn't speak about the details of the operations, he just had his orders, and he followed those orders, including the orders to sink his own ship.
It's a really, it's like a thriller to read this, Jakten på Thunder, which is the Swedish title. And I think people will get involved and start to think and wonder about the organization Sea Shepherd, which is like a little bit like Greenpeace, but in this field and this area. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me, Malou.
Thank you.